A few years ago, I was on a business training call and a woman spoke up on the call talking about finances in your business. She had a very unique and different perspective and approach, and I knew I had to meet her. I tracked her down and later hired her to help me support me around finances in my business. She literally changed the landscape of how I think about and manage money in my business and my life. Today, she joins us to share many of the things that I learned and more. Kelly Marshall is a bookkeeper, prosperity advisor, coach, and today she shares insights around different ways to approach budgeting, debt, and the shame we carry, how to lighten up our approach to money, and how we can align our values and goals to all of our money encounters, and so much more. Get ready to think differently when it comes to money. I'm Carla Reeves, and this is Differently, a podcast where we explore the ins and outs of what becomes possible when we're willing to think, do, and show up differently to the moments of our everyday lives. So welcome, Kelly. So excited you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be here with you and have this conversation because it's an important one.
Yeah. So tell us just a little bit about you.
Yeah. Well, I'm a happy wife and mom. We live in Buffalo, New York. We have lots of little fur babies around us too. We have 2 dogs and a cat and a hamster and some fish and kind of a crazy little household. Yeah. And you know, I've been an entrepreneur pretty much all my life. I was the little girl picking raspberries and selling them at the end of my driveway and, you know, doing garage sales and even as I started a professional career, I always had something going in an entrepreneurial experience. But I had these kind of different segments of my life. And in the last couple of years, I've been able to pull them together in a business where I do support conscious entrepreneurs, people that are looking to make a difference in the world. And I support them with a skill set and background that I've developed with money and accounting and a lot of the practical pieces that are so important to a business. They're really important to everyone, whether or not they're an entrepreneur. I just choose to work with entrepreneurs, but really supporting them with that part of their business so that they can continue to make the world better, so that they can expand their impact. And through that, I get to really have an impact in the world. So that's kind of where that's been my little journey into this money world and entrepreneurial world.
I love that. I love that you brought up what you did when you were little. I think there's so many clues to what we did when we were young, to our passions and our deepest desires. And I also love that you have been able to sort of combine those different parts of yourself into your work and feels good, right?
Yeah. And it took a while to get there. You know, it took me a while to figure that out. I had them very separate. And this business has been my way of bringing together. And it just feels so good when you can have that alignment of your purpose and your passion with what you're doing for your money. It feels really good. Yeah.
Who do you primarily work with? I know you said conscious entrepreneurs, but do they fall in as and they're impact driven? But do you work with mostly women, men?
I have worked with mostly women. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I have worked with mostly women because I thought that was only who I wanted to work with. And then just in the last year, I had the opportunity to be in a group where it was all conscious entrepreneurs, men and women. And I found out that it wasn't that I only wanted to work with women, but I wanted to work with that right energy. And that's when I opened it up to men and women and found it was really the difference makers. So I call them the helpers and the healers, but it's really the people out there, primarily with service-based businesses that are often heart-based and they're supporting others, you know, so coaches and people that do energy healing businesses and things like that. Yeah.
And what do you see come up again and again for people? Like, I know you help us untangle and transform those money beliefs. And so what do you see come up again and again for people?
One of the biggest things with that group, and it's not only the group of the helpers and the healers, but one of the biggest things is, well, there's 2 things that come to mind. One is kind of wanting to ignore that money piece. And it comes out of two places. Either it's something that they just naturally don't want to pay attention to, or just not, it's just not, they feel like it's not that important to them, and it just truly isn't. Or there's one where it's more of, it's a judgment about it. They have these feelings like they have a vision for themselves. They know they have this potential. They want more money, but they judge themselves for it. So, and that really comes into play with the spiritual entrepreneurs, the conscious business owners, because they truly want to do their work as a service of their heart, but they also need to make money. And when it comes to the money piece, when it comes to charging for it, it can cause this love-hate relationship with money. So I really help them work through that, because I know the importance of them doing well, because the better they do, the better they can help the world. And when they don't pay attention to that piece or judge themselves, and they don't make the money that they need to make, then it's harder to walk their talk. They might have to go out of business and go back and get a job. They're not fulfilling their purpose in the way that they could when they can resolve that love-hate piece. So that's what I see a lot with that group. And that's not isolated to entrepreneurs. I mean, spiritual people in general, or anybody really, can run into those same types of blocks and same type of money stories. Yeah.
Like a inner conflict.
Yes, for sure.
Well, and I know that's something you helped me with. I think I fell on the side of just a little bit of avoidance around money. Like it's over there. And I didn't pay as much attention to it as I needed to. And, you came into my life right when I went out under my own brand, and we'll talk about profit first later, but starting to work with you at that time and really, getting in the know about my money around my business, and knowing my numbers and looking at them regularly and just being informed was really a game changer around just my confidence around even thinking about it, talking about it, not getting weird about it, just
Yeah.
being real about it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, what's the journey yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what's so funny about what you're talking about is it keeps reminding me of where I was prior to meeting my husband, which was at 27. So prior to that, so when I was kind of on my own until 27, I had that avoidance piece for some reason. Even though I worked in accounting, I had that background, I had all the knowledge I needed, but I remember not opening letters for my insurance company, and I ended up getting dropped from there. And it was such a silly thing. And it was just that I wasn't opening the mail. I was avoiding it. Or my mom would have a conversation with me, and I couldn't even talk to her about money because I was in this weird place with it. I was feeling, I think it was shame and feeling funny about it. And it started in my relationship with my husband, and learning to work through knowing that that was an important part of our marriage, and being willing to do the work to learn how to talk with him about it. And he had a totally different viewpoint on it. And in our relationship, it really broke that open for me, where I was able to then talk about it. And I really think that was the beginning of my work, even though that was 10 plus years before I even started this as a business. It was the beginning of my work. And it was that healing process for me helped me understand what's possible for others too. So that was kind of my journey with that.
Yeah, for years in my marriage too, it would be anytime we would talk about money, it would just spiral into this almost just the same conversation over and over again, and so unfulfilling. And it would really just get in the way of our love and connection. And I got so fed up and tired of that. And I remember one day in my mind, all of a sudden, I really got clarity and saw that I was allowing money to rob our love and connection. And it was like this hierarchy I saw, and I had finances above the well-being of our marriage. And in my mind, I just flipped those two pieces. And then all of a sudden, money became something to handle in our marriage and our life, instead of allowing it to rob our connection anymore. And it's not that it changed everything, like it took time, but since then we've been able to just talk about money in a more just calm manner, if you will.
Yeah. Or even playful. I think that's something that you've brought into your money relationship, is a little sense of play, that it doesn't have to be a negative or a downer or that spiral. It can be playful and and fun, and just bringing a little bit of that energy into it the way we would any other self-care practice. If you think about that, or any other intentional practice we have, we might have to decide what energy we want to bring to it, and be really intentional about it until it becomes a habit. For mine, it was really the shame piece. My husband just didn't have that. Like, he came into this with a different value system around it. And that was the part that let me release some of the shame around the money piece. And that's a huge one for a lot of people. They have a lot of judgment about how they've handled it in the past, or, this belief, especially if we think about business owners, but it really goes for anybody. We all think everybody else has it figured out, and we're the only ones that have this struggle. And I'm here to tell you that is so not true. And I know, because I have a lot of these conversations, and everybody, when they first start sharing stuff with me too, they kind of do it so tentatively, or with all these these excuses, or, these stories behind stuff. And I just help them see that their story is not unique, that they share that, and that they can overcome that feeling, the judgment feelings around it, and start to release that, and then change their trajectory with it, change their path with money to really be able to align it with where they want to go with their goals and their dreams.
Mm. So, two places I want to go. One is what you see as far as the impact when we allow these beliefs to kind of run our approach around money.
Mm-hmm.
And two, the shifts that you see once people really do start to be courageous and really look at this stuff and make changes.
Yeah. So the first one, the impact when we allow it to rule us, is, and I'm trying to be mindful of both the individual and the person as an entrepreneur, or, business owner, because in both cases, it's playing small. Like, it keeps us limited. It puts an invisible ceiling of some kind over us that keeps us locked down into our current reality of what we're experiencing. And if it's not enough, that can be really painful and cause all kinds of stress and things like that. What happens often is I find that people will make just enough that they can kind of maintain this level that they've, kind of created their identity around. They've decided, I'm middle class, I've got some debt, I've got this business, and they can kind of cover their bills and make things work, but they're frustrated because they're not getting to that next level. They're not breaking through that. And as we start to unwind some of those stories that are keeping them in that place, they can start to rise up and kind of level up to the next level. And what's interesting, I had a really fun experience of working with somebody kind of in a shorter container, and she leveled up and she started making more money. And we weren't working together at that same level. So I wasn't, meeting with her monthly and kind of celebrating her money goals. But we had a check-in. It was almost a full year later. And we worked through some things, and I pointed out to her, she had broken through a 6-figure mark and didn't even know it. And it was so cool, first of all, that she had created that. But then when I let her know that piece, I got to witness her whole identity shift around it. So that's that other piece when we kind of can untangle some of those things, but we can't just stop paying attention to it. We still have to pay attention to the numbers. And once she knew, oh my gosh, I'm now a 6-figure business owner, the permission she could give herself, she had a totally different conversation with her son about money that day, and she said to me, I would have handled that different had I not known what I had accomplished in my business. And it was so fun to truly get to witness that for her, that, that she was able to break through that level and then really shift into her identity and really claim that space. If she keeps doing that work and pays attention to it, she can stay there and then level up. If we start to ignore it or slip into those avoidance behaviors, she can slide back down to kind of that comfortable level underneath that ceiling that she had created for her life up until that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. It makes me think of, I've heard people say that people that win the lottery, they win the lottery and then their life they either spend all that money or like basically bring themselves back down right to where they were.
Yep.
And that's just what you're describing. It. If we don't address the beliefs and really do some work around that, then we don't expand that capacity or raise that thermostat.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have to shift the identity to match that I actually think it's good to shift it before you get there, but then we have to do the work to maintain it and not kind of slide back down. So if they at that point put in the support systems that somebody, let's say they win millions of dollars, if they put in the support systems to support that, if they work on their beliefs around being that person, they can hold that level of worth. And if they don't, they're going to go right back to where it's comfortable. And that's just our subconscious or whatever we believe it is kind of returning to that normalcy that feels safe. And so we have to break out of those things that make us feel safe to accomplish the goals that we have. And I think what's interesting too, what I see, and I know that I've talked to a lot of people that in my world that, push for the entrepreneurial piece or push in their career or are really just kind of happy to stay where they're at. And I really have a belief that people that have that inner knowing that they have the potential for more are the ones that do have that potential for more. And that's why that desire is there, but they have to be willing then to raise the thermostat, as you said, like to create the capacity for that more. And if they don't do that, if they fail to do that part, they're going to keep getting the results, that comfortable result of where they've always been. So there is some work to be done to kind of break through to that level, but it's doable. And you have that knowing, that desire is placed within you because it's there for you. You just have to do the work to kind of unlock it so that you can get to that level.
It makes me think too that that's just, it's not unique to just money. In the work I do with clients, it's like expanding your capacity to receive love in your life or to give love. If we don't do the work, we can return to those protective mechanisms where we, push love away. It's really the same kind of thing, right? We
Absolutely.
expanding that capacity for whatever it is in our life.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how what are ways we can begin to think and do differently around money? What are some simple ways that you find really effective?
Hmm. I think I got a couple that come to mind. One is, like I talked about, the shame or those pieces, that heaviness, being willing to question those things and being willing to first start with releasing some of those. And I have a concrete example of one. So if you think about debt, that's a big one that people, that feels really heavy for people. It comes with not only the fear of that obligation, but also the shame around why it's there. A lot of times people will feel, like, I don't know, there's this judgment piece around holding debt. Those that have that, some people are going to hear this and be like, I don't know what she's talking about. Like, my husband would never have had that piece. But for me, that was a big thing. And for a lot of my clients, it is. And so reframing why that debt's there. And I don't mean in judgment. I mean, there's some that are very easy. So if somebody's taken on debt, like think about student loans, people don't hold a lot of shame around those because that's kind of a socially acceptable debt that people have accumulated. But the same thing goes, if somebody's invested in something for their business, or if they've maybe taken a trip that's created lifetime memories, or even if they just did it to survive, finding ways to reframe that debt without the judgment can shift the heaviness of it. So lighten up what that debt load is and know that it's just debt. It's not morality. It's not indicative of what kind of person you are. It's just an obligation you have to pay back. So just reframing how you feel about your debt can be a great way to lighten up around that feeling so it's not dragging you down. Reframe it, make a plan to get rid of it, and work towards your plan. It can be as simple as that, but it starts with releasing the heaviness. It starts with releasing the shame, releasing the overwhelm, opening up the mail, opening up the bills, getting it organized. Those things all help you lighten it up and let go of some of the heaviness around it. It's much heavier when you're ignoring it than when you just look at it. And if you,
That's so true.
right? Yeah. And if somebody needs support around that, they can get a person, or they can also, like I said, kind of employ some self-care habits around it. There's one money coach out there, and she'll talk about, and this isn't for everyone, but she'll talk about, pour yourself a glass of wine, have a little piece of chocolate, and then go work on your money stuff, or I'll
Like a
say,
money date.
a money date. Or somebody's starting to do it and it's starting to feel overwhelmed, go take a bath, take a break, and then go back to it. Create some support for yourself around that, some self-care around those pieces. And it might sound silly, but it makes all the difference in the world. what I find is people think, well, I'm going to get, let's say like for entrepreneurs that have ignored their money for a whole year and now it's, they need to get their information in for a tax preparer. They've got to do their taxes. And there's probably a lot of people at certain times of the year that face that. And it feels so heavy. They think they've got to sit there for 3 days and go through everything. And, if they kind of employ those self-care habits and just pick away at it, maybe dedicate a few hours, if they need to do it in the short time, set up some time blocks and get it done instead of feeling like it's this big, heavy thing that they have to do for, a painful process for 3 days or something like that. So and then for the next year, spreading it out so it doesn't feel like it's this big thing at the end of the year.
I think that's a place that you helped me so much. I think as an entrepreneur for years, it was like I just had this pressure on myself, and you've kind of touched on that I should know all this. I should know all these things about money. I should be managing my money better, and all these shoulds that made me feel terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And asking for help and hiring out that part of my business to have you really come in and support me and bring your expertise, that I didn't have to be the expert, and that you were there to guide me and help me look at my numbers every month, like literally sit with me and kind of walk through what the different things mean and where there were shifts or changes, and help me really start to think about the way that I was spending, or the way that I was just thinking about all of it. You expanded my thinking so much around that. And prior to hiring you and having that profit first methodology, I would be that person at the end of the year scrambling and dreading pulling everything together for my taxes. And after working with you, I've never had that. I had the money is, we set it aside all year long. And so it immediately comes out the moment I make it. And at the end of the year, the money's there and ready
Yeah.
to, I'm ready to pay taxes. And you put together the reports for me. And that's just taken such a huge load off of me personally and in my business. And it makes me feel so empowered and feel so good that I'm on top of that.
Yeah. And that
And then
alone can make a difference in your money making, that alone, like feeling. So first, again, it kind of goes through that releasing that judgment, the shoulds, and kind of be like, okay, I'm just going to get help with this. And then because it's all taken care of, there's that good steward, if you will. You've heard that expression about money loves a good steward. And because that part's taken care of, it frees you up to just make the money. And I think that when people don't, they kind of ignore that step. And not that everybody has to hire it out right away. There's kind of a progression to that point when your business is ready for that. But when they are paying attention to it and they know it's taken care of, it opens them up to then grow their business. When that part is iffy, and I've seen the same thing happen, some people will find a way to kind of break through that ceiling without dealing with that part, but then all the money's gone and they're spending it. And they don't know how to scale their business. They run into other problems. So it's really a really important piece to take care of at any level in your business, because it just frees you up to make more, and then have some of that in your pockets, or like keep it. You mentioned Profit First, which is a great cash management system. Where you're taking care of the things you need to take care of. You create the buckets for your tax money. You create the bucket for what goes to Carla personally. You create the bucket for what's there to run the business. And then we have the profit bucket. And it just simplifies that piece. So that question of, well, I don't know how much money is available to spend in my business. It makes that easy. You don't have to wonder about that. It takes the mystery out of it, and you just get in the habit. And the same can be done in personal spending too. And either create, I'm not a budget believer. I don't love budgeting. I think it often is not the thing that is really the answer for most people. And if anything, can make people feel like failures if they don't accomplish it. You hear a lot of money coaches out there really pushing that, or people that have done well in a budget, but that might be the right solution for them, and it may not be the right solution for you. And so I'm really a believer in kind of the buckets, that idea of having categories of what you need to spend or what you need to save, but not budgeting down to like, this is our entertainment budget. This is our food budget, kind of having buckets for, this is our family spending money. knowing the things that you have to take care of, the mortgage and the car payments, having that kind of bucketed, and the other piece to that is really thinking about the spending as you're spending in your business or in personal. Is that spending aligned with your values? Is that spending reflecting who you want to be? And really thinking about that. There's that intentionality again, really deciding who you want to be with your money, and looking at how you're spending it to see if it's aligned with who you want to be.
I'm
Right?
getting so excited. Yes. So a couple things. One, you talked about being a good steward of your money. And that just so speaks to me because, well, partly because of my faith and my values. I want to be a good steward of money. And so being in the know and understanding it and paying attention to it and nurturing it and all those things was just all a part of that, which you really helped me work through. But one of my favorite exercises that you gave me was around this idea of really bringing your spending into alignment with who you are and your values.
Mm-hmm.
And talk a little bit more about that, because I think you asked me, like, what kind of spender do you want to be? And really tying that in with your heart and what's important to you. And I love that. So say more about that.
Yeah, I'll try to make it a quick one because that could be a 45-minute conversation. But yeah, I mean, really thinking about so let's do it as an example, maybe thinking about who you want to be. And if who you want to be is someone that pays attention to their money, or somebody that, you know, I'm trying to think of a different phrase for it, but somebody who, why can't I think of one, Carla? Give me one.
Well,
Let's
I'm
just say
thinking of
pays
a
attention.
couple.
Okay, you go ahead and give one.
Well, I was
That'll
just,
help me.
the things that were coming to mind was like, being generous. Like something around, sometimes I would feel if I didn't have enough money, then I can't be generous. And that's not true. I know now. And so being generous around money, or having your money really have a positive impact,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go with that one for a second. Like, being a generous spender in the fact with it making an impact, not a generous and like it's just going everywhere.
Right.
And let's say you start to, you can, there's two ways to do this. You could just move forward with that idea, or you could kind of look back at how you've been spending. And if you think about looking back for a second and you see it's a lot of like, kind of impulsive spending, or it's spending that's just kind of emotional in the moment spending. And it's maybe you're, and I say all of this without judgment, but because I can be guilty of this. Like, let's say you're walking through the line at TJ Maxx or something, and you find three things as you're like waiting in line to go up there, that impulsive
Never
spending.
done that.
Yeah, me either. And it's not like, say those things end up not giving you value in your life. They weren't really joyful. They, just ended up, being thrown out a little while later, whatever that looked like. That's an example of a time where if you had thought about that and thought about, like, if I didn't buy this little tchotchke thing that I didn't really want or need anyway, that would have been more money I could have been generous with, or I could have used that to, buy something for somebody special that was really intentional, or whatever that looks like for that person that's identified that they want to be a generous spender. Those are those moments where you start to give yourself an anchor of what to evaluate your spending on, versus it's not in my budget. Like, that feels really restrictive. That feels really, for me, negative. And if somebody tries to restrict me, I'm going to be like, well, then I want two of them. I get like that little brattiness. But when it's really truly by my choice that I've made, and I choose that I want to be this intentional, generous spender, and that little thing really doesn't matter to me. It's just an emotional kind of fun little high as I'm walking up to the cashier. I have that moment to analyze that in a very empowered way and say, you know what, I don't want that, because I'd rather give this money to this other thing that I like to support, or whatever that other way of aligning to your spending. So it gives you that moment to think about your spending, either looking back on the past or going into your daily life. That is a non-restrictive way of aligning your spending to your values and to your goals. And that's a really important piece too, is like, even as we say good steward, it's not getting into judgment for the things you've done in the past. Like, it's kind of like knowing more now, like, no, now you can do better kind of a thing, and start to meet yourself where you're at today and move towards that place, instead of, well, they said I should be a good steward and I'm not right now. And so you're going to sit in judgment, and that's going to spiral you the way that we don't want it to spiral you. So I think getting intentional from where you're at right now and moving forward with that can feel really empowered instead of restricted. Does that help?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love when you talk about, because I think budgeting, I always had this should around budgeting, and it just never felt aligned or right for me. And it your approach gives you so much more freedom and choice.
Yeah.
And I like that. I was laughing because you talked about TJ Maxx. And like, it used to be you just had that little section before you checked out that was like you could grab some simple things. And now it's like a mile long. And if you, I was thinking like that's the ultimate test,
It
right?
really is. They know what they're doing. Whoever created that new little checkout thing, it's temptation, and they hit every
Oh,
category as you walk through. So yeah, I mean, that could be a great. It's funny if when the world opens up, I could lead little tours through TJ Maxx and talk about spending. The other thing that came to mind, and this almost felt like an intuitive hit, so somebody that's going to be listening to this needs to hear this, is, another piece where some spending leaks can happen. I like to think of it as money leaks or spending leaks, where it's things that really aren't serving us, not in the restrictive way, but in that really empowered way. And there's something around boundaries. There are people who, you think about parents and spending with their kids, or like the mom that never buys anything for themselves because they're only buying it for their kids, or can't say no to their kid for what they want, or even with a partnership. That was a hard one. I'm a nurturer, and I love to really take care of people. And so when I was in charge of our budget, if you will, for our home, like I said, we don't budget, we do buckets, but we have a spreadsheet. We're very nerdy accountants. And so when I was in charge of that, that was challenging for me to say no, to have that boundary around money for myself or for my partner. And so really thinking about who you want to be with money in that way too. What are the boundaries that you want around that for yourself and for others? Nurturers have a habit of giving away money, and if it's not money, it's time. And so really supporting yourself and thinking about the boundaries you want around that can be another example of intentionality with your spending that can be very supportive.
Yeah, so I want to circle back quickly and just mention Profit First. And it's a book by Mike Michalowicz. And you and I actually met over Profit First, which
That's
is so
right.
funny. But great book, and I'll make sure I link that. The other thing you were talking about is, our spending values. And I think one of the things you really helped me to see is, setting aside that profit money and paying a little something to myself, even from the very get-go, however small that is, and then using that money in a way that really aligned or felt good. And I found out pretty quickly that, spending that money on a experience with my family, or, doing something, all of us together, that was a great way for me to bring more play and lightness and joy. And, we work so hard to bring in money. And then I was not always great at really enjoying some of
Mhm.
the fruits of the work. And
Yeah.
so do you see that a lot?
Oh, for sure. That's one of the smart. So Mike's book is so simple and so smart. It doesn't always mean it's simple to implement, and that's where people could use some help. But the concept is really simple, and it works with our behaviors. And that profit piece is part of that behavior, because before I had Profit First, the reason I actually even sought out that as a solution was I had a client who he's been a client forever. So I've had, like I said, an entrepreneur forever. I've had a bookkeeping business for 15 years. It's just been in the last 3 years that it's evolved into the coaching. So for years I would work with him, and on paper he made money. On paper, at the end of the report I gave him said he made money. And it was the catalyst for me finding Profit First as a solution was he said to me, with almost tears in his eyes. And he had a multi-million-dollar business. And he said to me, Cal, when do I get to take a profit? And my heart broke because this man
Wow.
had worked hard. He worked hard for that. And the truth was that it was on paper, but there was nothing left in the bank account. There was
Mm.
no wins for him and his family during that time. And, or if there were, it wasn't stuff he recognized because it wasn't intentional. And so I didn't have an answer for him because I was an accountant. On paper, he made money, and I didn't understand that piece. And then I found Profit First and read the book and understood the behavior piece of that. And we have to be, as business owners, like what often happens is we make the money and we just spend the money and we hope there's some left over for us at the end. And if you keep it that way, there won't be. And so Profit First allows for you to intentionally pay yourself first, profit first, pay yourself first. And the way that they teach you to handle the profit piece of taking that win on a quarterly basis, it's such a behavioral impact for the business owner, for their family, to say to your family, like, we get to go do this fun thing because of mommy's business, is so empowering, feels so good for you as a business owner, helps them enjoy parts of that too. Like, you did work hard for that, and it allows them to kind of enjoy the fruits of that labor too. So it's super powerful. And for some people, they don't give themselves permission, even if they're not the type that spend all the money, they still don't give themselves permission to enjoy that money. And so I often focus on the people that spend all the money, but that's not true. In your case, that's not true either, but it's permission to spend it. And sometimes that's all we need, is that little bit of permission, and it made it more fun. It wasn't like I'm blowing this money from my business. I'm supposed to take this. This is my profit distribution. This is my win. And just that little shift, again, it's back to intentionality. That little shift and that little bit of permission makes it so much more fun.
So true. It makes me think back to corporate days when I did get a bonus check, and that was so exciting, and it felt so different. And then when I started my own business, in the beginning I didn't have that. And you helped me really implement that piece to bring back that excitement about it again. And
Well, and
yeah,
that's, you
so
had mentioned you can start small, and that's what's important too. Like I think the first time for us, I took out all of us for ice cream. That was our first time. And that was what I had. It was, I just started. So you can start small, but it's creating that habit so that as the business grows, that amount grows, but the habit is formed in there.
is there.
And that can be
Yeah.
done on the personal side too. So people that have a job, some of this is your taxes are taken care of. You already got that bucket, but when that money's coming in, kind of thinking of those buckets in a way that are supportive. So it's not just, how do I cover all my bills? It's thinking through some of those other buckets. They can use the same behavior system that Profit First uses without it being budgety. It can be done in a different way.
So good. So good. So I know you have a gift for people listening, but before you describe that, I know it relates to, you have a system or something that you help people really understand kind of who they are and their patterns around money. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called the Sacred Money Archetypes. It's created by Kendall Summerhawk, but it's an awesome assessment. It starts with an assessment that helps you determine your top 3 archetypes. And archetypes are really they represent a pattern of how how you make decisions and how you kind of exist just naturally in who you are. And so with the money archetypes, it helps you really understand. I call it like your filters. It helps you understand your money filters. Like how do you run a decision through your money filters and come to your decision? And we have different natural archetypes. And so the assessment allows you to know yours. I think it's also really important to understand a business partner's or a spouse, or, it might even be fun if you've got older children to like understand theirs, so that you can understand if your husband comes up with something that seems totally crazy compared to what you came up with. He has different filters, and understanding his filters can help you understand his decisions more. And it creates this place where you can start to have a different conversation versus, you're nuts, I don't understand how you came to that decision. But even if you just focus in on yourself, like think about, we talked about the judgment and the shame. If all of a sudden you understand, let's say you've been avoiding money and it's because you're a connector, that's in your nature to do that. And you can suddenly have a little bit more space of understanding for yourself and a little bit less judgment towards the things that have happened in the past. Like, let's say you tried that budgeting system and you're very much not the type that that's going to be a strength for you. You just tried to implement a system that didn't work for you or wasn't meant for you, so you're not a failure. It just wasn't the right system. And so it helps you understand what are your strengths and your challenges so that you can start to take actions aligned with your strengths versus your challenges. You can start to make decisions based on the things that will be really supportive of you instead of trying to fit into somebody else's box. So I think it's a valuable tool. I use it with all my clients because I need to understand where they're coming from, because then I can support them in a different way. So the assessment I have for free for your listeners to check it out if they're interested in that.
I love that. Well, and you really helped me to, when you said, understanding your partner's type and design, it so helped me to just sit back and respect some of his behaviors instead of judge them or make them wrong. And it really helped me communicate around money differently. So I love that.
Yeah.
So yes. So how do they find out about that? I know we'll link it in the show notes.
Mm-hmm. But it's just my website. So 238, the number's 238, which is my daughter's favorite number when I started the business, which is a very creative way of naming your business. 238accounting.com. And then it's a /SMA. So Sacred Money Archetypes, 238accounting.com/SMA. And then they can take the assessment and they'll get an email of their top 3 with a little description of those.
Okay, great. So before we close, I just want to ask you, what is your why behind this? I mean, I can see like you just light up when you talk about it, and I just want to know. I want you to share what is it that just lights you up about supporting people in this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it, the selfish piece is that I get so much fulfillment out of knowing I've helped grow a business that's making a difference. So when I thought about what I wanted to do, that was the biggest piece of aligning that part of the business, because it was my way of having an impact. It was my way of taking these skills, this accounting background and these skills, and applying it to a way that I could create a lot of impact. So that's super fulfilling. But what I love, it just makes me feel good. And I love that part when I'm talking to somebody and they have that shift, like that conversation with the one client where she realized she hit the 6 figures and it changed everything. And that moment where she had that aha, it just fills my heart. And I think that's where the piece, why the focus, especially on women, but it's opened up to conscious business owners, because we undervalue those pieces so much. We beat ourselves up about those pieces so much. And so the fact that I can support somebody and lift some of that burden off of them, lighten that up for them, it just makes my heart full. And that's the big why. I don't ever want to have to look at a business owner again. Maybe this really could have come down to, maybe you're helping me have an epiphany. I don't ever want a business owner to look me in the eye and say, when do I get to take a profit after 10 years of hard work, and say it's on paper. I never wanted to be in that position again. I wanted the tools to be able to support him so that he didn't have to feel that way anymore, because business owners shouldn't work that way or shouldn't feel that way. They should be able to enjoy what they're creating in the world.
Wow. Okay, so where can people find you? I guess you gave your website, but why don't you just say it one more time?
238accounting.com. And then my other favorite place to nurture people is in my Facebook group. So I have a group. I'm in process of changing the name. So I'm going to say that right now it's Prosperous and Profitable Female Entrepreneurs. And if Facebook ever allows me to, because right now there's a glitch, but I want it to be Prosperous and Profitable Conscious Entrepreneurs. So if you search Prosperous and Profitable, you find it either way. And I love to serve in there. Once a week, I do a money talk on Mondays. It's a very supportive group of people that love to celebrate each other. And so it's really fun. And I'd love to have people join me there.
Awesome. So I just want to thank you for being here today. I hope people listening can feel, you bring such a lightness around the topic and such a freedom. And I feel inspired always after talking with you, and it's no different today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Differently. I hope it stirred your thinking, and I invite you to take one inspired action from something that stood out to you. If you want to hear more conversations like this, hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and please help us spread the word by sharing this podcast with people you know. Remember, new episodes drop weekly. See you next week.